Can you hear me and see me okay? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good, Ragnvaldr. So we'll welcome everybody to the episode. We're going to give a few more seconds for everyone to kind of pop on. And we're hoping for a good episode tonight. We were having some fun with our connection today. So we've had a few people pop in and out, our coaches. Good thing we have a lot of them. Hopefully it doesn't keep going. But tonight we have Duke Ragnvaldr, Sir Bess, or Viscount Sir Bess. We have Aighleanan. Everybody knows Aighleanan. He's been around forever. We have Viscount Tristan. He will be coming back, I am sure. And myself, Duke Brannos.
We're also been around forever.
What are you talking about? So while we're kind of still prepping up everything, tonight's episode is essentially going beyond your teacher, and we're going to cover. A lot of people take that as okay. Well, I'm better than my teacher now. I need to move on, and I'm not big on that as an answer, because I think we look at other sports, boxing, basketball, all of those sports. Those coaches and trainers may not actually have ever been as good as the people that they're training. But they understand what those people need, and they see what it is that they can help them develop. And that's a big point. And some of them are very good at bringing others to help that development. Some are very good at putting them in a path that allows that development to grow well. And tonight, I think that's what we're going to talk a lot about is essentially there's lots of ways to learn. It isn't necessarily always from one person, but one person sure does that. Having that support sometimes really does help all along the path. So while everybody's still kind of hopefully jumping on, we kind of put a structure together, but I think what we're really hoping for tonight is a lot of questions. And I think usually Bess and I are usually jumping out on the comments and trying to make sure that we get those questions rolling. And but I think what we're going to start with is let's start with thinking as a beginner, right? Because I think thinking as a beginner is probably the first step most people take. And there's usually some questions there, who is the best teacher at practice? But usually, actually, most people think, who is the best fighter at practice? Because they have the most to teach. And that could actually be two different things. I mean, what do you think, Aighleanan?
I do think it's two different things for sure. And I love the way you brought in other sports and such, because I've actually thought for a long time it's a problem. Whether I don't know if it's a problem that needs fixing, but it's a problem that I hope will fix itself within the society where we just don't do a particularly good job of both our older talent who's transitioning away from fighting into potentially roles of training. We don't do a good job of listening to them, and traditionally we've not done a good job of that older fighter transitioning into a training role. Trying to stay current. They oftentimes are trying to teach what they knew a long time ago. And I always think of I know it's a fictional movie, but I always think about, old boxing trainers like Burgess Meredith and Rocky. I mean, you know, but the thing about that is, where that might be a movie, that is something that happens all over boxing, martial arts, and other sports. You have these older knowledge holders, and people go to them because they actually have seen everything, but they actually will pay them to train them if they've seen everything and they're current. They actually are staying on top of what is happening today. What is the, if we take boxing, as an example, it's like they ought to be able to name all the current boxers, what they're doing, what their styles are, what their trainers are doing, how they're being, worked on. I think other sports, because they've all been around, they're more established, have done a much better job of this. And I'm hoping, and I hope that this group is going to be a part of older fighters transitioning into, because at some point we're just not going to be able to do it anymore, but we're going to transition into training roles, teacher roles. And we're going to remember to stay current, to always understand what the new training methodologies are, so that we can provide a breadth of experience, yet also be current. So I definitely think that's a thing. And I look forward to tonight's conversation, because, we have this notion of what do you do when you've outgrown your trainer. We also have the notion of, if I'm the best fighter at practice, how do I get better? And all these things are absolutely doable, and I think we'll have a chance to touch on these topics throughout the evening.
So, Ragnvaldr, how about you? You got some insight on essentially new fighters coming in and that kind of expectation? What do you see at your practice? I mean, for us, we're a little different, right?
To be fair, you've spearheaded a lot of that, and that what that is going from just a fighting practice to a training practice. And we've done that. We've worked at it for years now. Well, probably 15, 20 years we've been doing it. And one of the first things we did was you can fairly easy, once you get any experience fighting, you can kind of look around and go, these are good mid-level fighters, these are good high-level fighters, those are the best guys, right? But that tier works for training, we have found. So our new guys don't need to be trained by our knights and royal peers. They need to be trained by our mid-level fighters. They're perfectly capable. They know what to teach a new person. And more importantly, or just as importantly, it's a learning experience for them as well. I know, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, I know I've learned a lot by teaching, because it forces me to understand what I'm doing and be able to convey it to others. So the teaching process is also a learning process. So we like our mid-levels to train our newer fighters. But then there's also this overlap where the higher level fighters will sometimes, I know I will, shadow from outside and watch them, the mid-levels, teach the new people, so I can be there to help when it's necessary and to give input to them as instructors to help them become better instructors. Hopefully they don't have to stumble through it like I did.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because, I often say that, at our practice sometimes I think there are mid-level fighters that train new fighters far better than I do, because, what happens a lot is we go down a technical route that's before they can learn it, right? And I think that's one big reason I like Bess on the show a little bit, is she can kind of say, hey, how about you drop it down a couple layers so everybody can get a feel. So Bess, what do you think?
So you started this off, because I took notes as I always do. And you said, is the best teacher, does that equal the best fighter for the new kids? And my answer is, the best teacher for the new fighter is the one that the new fighter feels most comfortable with, regardless of experience level. So on Tuesday at fight practice, I was working with somebody. This was her second practice in armor. So cute. But I said to her, as we were working together, I said, here's the thing, I'm going to say things to you, and it might be that the way I say things doesn't work for you. I'll try saying things in a different way, but if it still doesn't work for you, please feel free to talk to somebody else. For example, I know somebody who likes to talk, God, I hate this, about throwing a blow as we did in the old days, serving a bowl of soup. And I'm like, oh, you're a waiter and you're balancing soup on your hand. I'm like, screw that. I hold soup by the edges of the bowls so it doesn't spill and it's not too hot. So when that person explains, throwing a blow, it doesn't work. For me, it worked when somebody said, throw a karate chop, oh, okay. So the best person for the novice fighter or the beginner fighter is the one who explains things in a way that they understand best and that they're comfortable with, regardless of level, because everybody is better than them.
That's super true. The regardless of level part is actually dead on as well, because oftentimes it's another coach that finds the terminology that resonates with the student. And it's not a thing we get jealous about. We should not get jealous about that kind of thing. We're all looking to find a way to connect with people. And, a good example we had that at our practice last night. There's a squire from Sir Stefan in the East who's living here, and he's training with Duke Morgan. And we were talking about something, and I explained my perspective on it. And he goes, I think Morgan's been trying to tell me that, and it's just not connected. And the way you said it, I understand. And, but he's been telling me the same thing. And I think even my knights told me that. But the way you just said it, I understand. And it's at all levels. I mean, we're all, and it's one of the reasons why having as large a chamber to get knowledge and share knowledge with is as good as you're comfortable with, as large a group as you can have, I think is beneficial. But again, as Bess says, it's what you're comfortable with and what the student is comfortable with, most importantly.
Brannos, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Right. So we have somebody that, that commented that they do this in their Tai Chi class. And this is something else that Ragnvaldr and I talked about years ago. And that is, we talk about it with everybody at practice, is that if you can spend more time with the people that are, that really you're going to probably most connect with anyways, and help them train, that frees up people that, are higher up to help you train. If all of a sudden you got 50 people at practice, what he says, he divvies up his Tai Chi class essentially to intermediate students and deeper level students. So the idea is you have somebody closer to the level of the person coming in. You have more of those people. You have 5 of those that are teaching 10 others. But maybe there's only 2 or 3 people at me and Ragnvaldr's level that can teach those trainers, those 5 that are training the others. And if we're trying to train all 15, everybody loses out on time. So that becomes that becomes one of those pieces that's important at a practice is to engage and make sure that if you think somebody's a poor teacher, well, help them be a better teacher, right? And I think one way we do that a lot of times, and we do this at our practice, is like, hey, I really like the way you do that. Show us how you do it. And what we do is we get them to show the thing that they're most comfortable with, the thing that, they are proud of. And all of a sudden they really do become better teachers. And because they've had a chance to kind of burn through and show people what they do. And it makes it much easier for them to now believe in themselves more and start passing more of that knowledge on. And as a good instructor, when you have the upper level instructors, their job is to help them understand how to train better. And then when they make a mistake or you want them to change that training a little bit, you just pull them off to the side and it's like, hey, I would just change this a little bit. Don't do it in the middle of the class. Pull them off to the side, say, hey, I changed this. This is more, you're just missing this little thing. It's something that's hard to adjust later. So we want to make sure you have it right now. I mean, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I think we've had some success and other times I think, we sometimes jump in, and I know for myself, it's like, I love teaching. So we'll jump in and we'll try to teach everybody out of practice. And I don't know about you, Ragnvaldr, but I found that it's relatively, I find that I can't get as much done.
Even more than not getting enough done, I find that I feel like I'm when when I do that, I'm working on doing less and less. But sometimes I feel like I'm being that guy, right? Because I'm also OCD, I watch somebody teach a thing and it's not exactly right. And the point is, if a mid-level is teaching a new person, it does not need to be precise, right? And it certainly doesn't have to be my way. But I find myself now and then catching myself either interrupting and interjecting, or at least thinking about it and stopping myself when they're doing a perfectly good job.
You
So
know,
when you say when you said you don't, when you see an intermediate teaching, you don't interrupt. I think that's really important, and that's been a failing of mine that I work on. So it's not so much the loss of my own time; it's the disruption of the very point we're trying to achieve. So I
Yeah,
think I want to add too, though, that though we're talking about these individuals teaching these individuals while these individuals watch over these individuals, this doesn't preclude people teaching a class, right? Because we've done that several times where we've taught a class at practice, and we'll usually choose a subject, we'll do the class, it's usually 15, 20, 45 if I'm talking too much. And everybody watches it. And what I find happens is there's a number of people who get little pieces from it and they kind of go off, and some forget, some take the pieces. And there's always a few that either come to us or come to someone and say, I had not thought about that. That's news to me. That's something I really want to try, whatever it is. And then then it goes to the individual. So I think open classes group classes are still important, so the information can go out, then people can take it and tailor it when they find like Bess said, the person. I thought that was brilliant. The best trainer for someone is the person they're most comfortable with. I think that I think tonight, if anything sums up tonight, that's probably the best phrase.
yay.
So Tristan, and I know we're catching you up a little bit, and actually, his Grace Conrad, although he has a new name, and one day I'm going to make sure I touch base with him, get his pronunciation right. But he's, I mean, deep into martial arts, and he talked about it as well, and that is that a lot of classes, a lot of martial arts studios, you have senior students and stuff that you use to help other students, right? And that way you can have multiple senior students in smaller kind of classes while they help and can watch them much better while you oversee those senior students and how they're teaching and so on. Is that kind of how sometimes you run your classes?
I don't. The reason that kind of method came about is when you have a very large student base and you don't have enough instructors,
right?
Senior instructors to go spread around, and you need to get personalized instruction. That's one approach. Another one is to have, one person leading an 80 to 100 person class, and the instruction is not very good. But they try it anyway because, usually within traditional martial arts, there's a great deal of authority worship where it's the top dog on the food chain that should be doing all the teaching and nobody else should, and which is kind of a toxic attitude to have, in my opinion. But I do find that even in a small group, you will have, and this happens in the SCA and even in my dojo, because I encourage it, is if you are working with somebody and even just one thing that can help them, you share it. You have that contact even by somebody who's only a little bit more experienced than the other person. And I found that in encouraging that with my students, you'll have observations made by somebody who's an intermediate that when they share what works for them to somebody even more senior, even a senior can learn something. So the idea that learning has to happen in a hierarchy is a false assumption. Where we learn is when we share ideas and discoveries of what we find. And it doesn't have to come out of one mouth. It doesn't have to come out of, purely the people that have been around the longest. They tend to have a lot more of those nuggets of knowledge to share, which is why it's good to go to people that are more experienced. But it's not a total trickle down principle of learning. We will always learn more by doing than we will by hearing somebody talk about things.
It's funny, my old geometry teacher back in high school made us teach each other geometry because the concept then even was you reinforce the topic by sharing it with someone else,
Definitely.
and it commits it to memory better.
One of
This
the
is really
things that,
really
that
cool how
teaching,
people are structuring their fighter practices around similar notions of allowing
absolutely.
other people the opportunity to teach and train as well.
And you, with anything martial, you can, well, and I suppose this applies to just about everything. You can get to a level of understanding of how to do something, and then you will try to teach somebody, and they will ask you a question that will challenge your level of understanding. And you will be humbled by that. And it can be, I've seen people kind of turn away from teaching because they feel like they're at a certain level of understanding that's pretty good. And being asked a question they can't answer makes them feel kind of foolish, like an idiot.
Right.
And they don't like that. And they'll say, well, go ask somebody who can articulate it better. They kind of have a defense mechanism to say, to avoid saying, I don't know.
Worse, they make crap up.
Right. Or yeah, worse is they make things up to make them sound like a big shot, because they don't want to let the person down who's coming and say, well, you're the big shot. You can tell me how this works. How does it work? And they're like, I don't really know how it works.
Spend our whole lives trying now to normalize that it's okay to not know everything.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, you have to, if realistic, that it comes down to if you think you've learned it all, then that's welcome to the downward path to defeat, right? And I think that's, and I know where you're coming. I think, like it's Tristan, I think we're going to talk about that part, that there's something to learn from everyone,
yes,
even the beginner. But I think there's, at the very beginning, you still have to lay down a foundation to build from.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to jump in here, bringing this back to the topic of the show, which is, what do you do when you're the best fighter of practice? One of the things you can do is teach, because you might be the best doer, but as Tristan was saying, once you start training and teaching, you learn how you really have to really understand your concepts and to be able to explain it. And I know, for example, at work, I'm a specialist in what I do, and people will come to me and they will challenge, like, well, what about this thing? And I'm like, well, you know what? I never thought about that. So people asking questions, as Tristan said, can actually make you better. And teaching people, if somebody says to you, well, you said I should do X in this fashion, but because of body parts, I can't do it that way. And you have to try to show them a new way of doing it. Then you yourself have learned a new way to throw a blow or to make a movement or to do the thing. So training other people can help you be better, because you have to find ways to help them do it, which gives you an alternative way to, say, I don't know, throw a leg shot or something.
Yeah. And I think, again, the episode is about better than your teacher, but I think right now we're talking, we jumped into the very beginning of, what do we look at the beginning of this? And, how do we start? And actually there was a question, and I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. And I thought it was, a good question, because I think this is how the SCA started. And that is, could you just go on the warpath and fight every member of the SCA searching for a warrior that can best you? I think that starts at the beginning and goes to the end. If you're a great fighter, if you want to be a great fighter, if you have that mentality, that's absolutely. But it's,
but it's two different things,
right?
It's two different things. One is, because this is me, in a nutshell, I am super freaking competitive, and I want to fight every person who can swing a shot, and especially if they're good. And I want to know who the best fighter is in every kingdom, and I want to go measure my body parts with them, But that's a component of me that doesn't necessarily make me a good trainer or even make me a very good fighter. It just makes me competitive and kind of good at the sport aspect of things. But the part that will slow down and try to understand what all those people are doing, and then trying to find a way to ask them good questions about it, and then be able to teach it to someone else, is the part that would make us good teachers or good coaches, and then we'll also advance the sport. But when I'm just trying to fight everybody, I'm not advancing the sport. I'm just advancing my ego.
That's true.
Yeah, well said.
I don't think that's a bad behavior, though. That is, it's definitely not part of, it's definitely not learning, but it can be treated. And you did not get this good by just, I think when you do it, and I say you because this is what I'm seeing in myself. So really what I'm saying is me. Um, there's absolutely an ego part of that. You know, I'm really good at this. That guy's really, really good. So I want to go fight him and see how I do. And either I win and I go, yep, I'm really good, or I don't win. But no matter what, if that's where it ends for me, then it's a problem. If I
Yes.
walk away from that and you are much too good a technical fighter to tell me you don't do this, you may walk into that fight with the ego, I'm going to win because that's what I do. But after, you can't convince me that you don't go, okay, win or lose, this is how it went in the fight. I did this. I didn't do this well. I got to work on this thing. So it becomes this chance to analyze. It was on this one of the things that I'm selfishly excited about Brannos healing up is the beauty for me of fighting him is not that I don't, if I'm not mistaken, he still beats me 60-70% of the time. I think is about where it's at. But what I get out of it is every time, the beauty is the moment I make any kind of mistake, he is right there to capitalize on it. And I don't get that from a lot of people. So
Right.
that's a lesson for me.
The testing is different. Like when you're in school, you test and then you move on to the next subject. Whereas in our sport slash beautiful, magical, historical, pseudo historical recreation stuff, the beauty of it is that you test all the time, and then you get to go back and apply what you learned from the test back to yourself, and then go test again. And when you're talking about with Brannos and what I've been very fortunate enough in my life to have, training partners to work with, and also when I've had a chance to go train with you guys, is no matter what I do, win, loss, and my ego drives me to go get the fight in all over and over and over again. But the part of me that loves fighting and wants to be better at fighting and wants to see the SCA get better at fighting, that part of me says, well, what did I do? What did they do? And how can I take, what can I take away from this? So the test and then the process of getting better just goes on and on and on. And that's not boring and that's not terrible. That's beautiful.
It is. Well, and the test is the key because we learn from failure, right? I mean, realistically, the good part is we can learn, a good person can learn from even his wins, like Ragnvaldr talking about. But that point of failure is one of the greatest opportunities to learn. And you look at some great fighters, some great boxers, they will, like Pacquiao or something like that, they'll lose and still be the best fighter in the world because they come out better next time. And then there's others that their whole life is about that loss and they can't continue on. They learn how frail they are and then they dive in there and they know that they're not undefeatable anymore. And that's a hard place to get out of. And so, there's that being able to pull that together and see the positive side of losing. And that, again, that's something that Duke Conrad's talking about out here a little bit as well. And that's the place. Now, going back to the question, just real quick though, if you don't know the fundamentals, sometimes it's very hard to tell what you did wrong. Right. So when you start up just looking to beat everybody, you don't know what to fix sometimes. So you're just throwing the next thing and next thing after the next thing. And where are you finding the next thing? You're usually watching others, but it's just sometimes it's a long path to get good compared to somebody who's trained well right off the beginning.
It has been the traditional SCA method by which we improve our prowess. And there's a lot to do it, and I still highly recommend it. It's still the majority of what I do, but I know that it's a slower curve than stop, analyze what you need to know, start making sure you're doing drills and working on the thing. what we talk about all the time on these streams is, taking it from just fighting and then hoping you get better to really training to get better. And, those are steeper, curves. You can see these jumps, and, we've all had students where we actually said, you're doing great. I love the fact that you're going and fighting everybody, but let's work on the things that you're not actually not doing well, and try to eliminate those things. And then all of a sudden there jumps, and that comes from targeted, specific coaching / training, not just going out and fighting and fighting and fighting, because you do get better that way, but it maxes out at some point, and it takes years and years to get really good that way. Unless you're just great coming in, you got a lot of physical, awesomeness.
That's the good part about our
awesome in the background.
What's that?
That was me being physically awesome in the background.
So, I guess that was by the way, that was a great question. I really liked it. And I think we all look for questions like that, and people throwing questions out there like that, because it challenges us to think about some principles as well.
And a number of us have lived that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still living it a little bit.
Yeah. And in a way, even, I talked to Tristan, and Tristan, you're kind of redeveloping Aikido in a new way. And you're finding others that have the same mind. But you're kind of having to do that a little bit yourself. Mm-hmm. You're kind of on a journey in that space too, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's different from the SCA. In fact, I miss the SCA aspect of it being such an open medium for a fighter, a participant to explore, rather than be granted a system, a curriculum that they have to stick to and have to sort of stay within their constraints. The SCA is fantastic for, total experimentation. And that's one of the things I get frustrated about a lot of structured martial arts is, and it's all ego driven about, okay, well, what is within the parameters of what this art is supposed to be, and then what's outside, and you don't go outside of it. And granted, I'm not talking about competition rules as much as, how techniques are done, and that hierarchy we talked about before is very rigid. If some guy who's been doing this for 25 years says this is how everything is always done, and you say, well, I'm getting success by doing it a different way, mm-hmm. It's politics that's going to basically shut down that innovator who comes in and says, but I'm making this work the way that I'm doing it. And politics has always frustrated me because it usually stands in the way of progress. It doesn't help it. But yeah, it is one of those things. And even within the SCA, we've seen hierarchies happen where you have the immutable guru who speaks, of these golden concepts, and they can never be contradicted. And most of the time they're right, but sometimes they're not. And if I found anything in life, is there's pain in embracing a falsehood, believing that it's true. Sooner or later, you're going to find out that it was not true, and that in order to get, and that's usually where that plateau is. You keep banging your head on that ceiling going, why can't I get past this? Why can't I get better, is because you haven't let go of something that's not true. Either you believing your footwork is good and it's not, or anything down to the even nitpicky little details. Oh, I'm really good at movement or evading, or I'm really good at throwing a shot. Well, are you?
Yeah, and you have to be willing to admit.
Yes, right? To say, well, maybe I thought I was, but maybe I'm not, and maybe I need to go look at it again.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to jump into, and let's go ahead and do it, that kind of that intermediate role. And, kind of the first question I threw out on that intermediate role was, our first comment essentially is that place where you feel like maybe your teacher is going in a different direction than you, mm-hmm. or that you want to try something else, but your teacher may not have it, or it may be too rigid to allow you to, mm-hmm. What do you do in that place? Right. Mm-hmm. As that practitioner, you get into that place and they're like, no, you can't do it that way. You have to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you say that, Brannos. So a practice a little while ago, I was working with somebody and we were trying to work on a thing. It doesn't even matter what the thing was. One of the other experienced fighters in the group came up and said, I would never, ever do that. And then gave a reason why. And I don't want to go into the details of it because that's not what this is about. But so here we have a student trying to learn something, and you have two experienced fighters. One, me, who knows things, la 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 la, going, yeah, I really think this is, if you do this combination and do it this way and this way, that you could have success with that. And the other fighter coming in and saying, I see what you're trying to do, but if you slip up with that, then you can hurt somebody by doing it this way. And sort of saying, because somebody could get hurt, never ever do it. And to me, it kind of felt like they were preventing innovation because of the potential for an injury. And what I want to say is, have you seen our club?
Yeah.
We as fighters and opponents, we take that a certain amount of risk onto ourselves. So then shortly thereafter, I got sick and didn't go to practice for a couple of weeks. So, and I haven't seen that fighter since, but I will be curious to see, they themselves are fairly high-ranking fighters. So I'll be curious to speak to them and see how they chose to resolve it for themselves or how they would like to proceed with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, first, you have to be very careful as a teacher coming in and saying, it's okay to say, I don't do it that way, but to globally say, I would never do something, that's fine for you. But other people, you're just, here's the reasons why I don't do it. But, in the end, it's up to that other individual. So, but especially to say that after listening to another trainer do that is rude, personally. I think that's a poor. They are only showing their colors to the person that they're talking in front of. And
now, here's the thing. I will say that the other trainer brought to my attention the potential or the possibility for injury if this thing to your opponent, if you hadn't done this correctly, which is something I myself was not aware of. So it actually, while the way it was done, maybe, but it'll make me better because next time if I work on with somebody else with this technique, I can say, but you need to be aware when you do it that the possibility exists that this, that an injury could happen as a result of it. So while I do go back to maybe it could have been done a little more quietly or less vehemently, it certainly brought a good point to light, which Tristan, this was your thing earlier when you're saying some people don't want to be able to or don't want to train because they're afraid that maybe they're doing it wrong. Well, this could have been an example of me going, well, I guess I did it wrong. Instead, I still think I was right because, my ego, but I'm willing to help say, let's make sure you do this in as safe a manner as possible.
Yes.
So since we're really focusing on the student in this situation, what should the student do?
Well, I think the student has to be open-minded and you listen. This is kind of one of those, your parents fighting in front of you moments.
Yeah. And that's right. I mean, they're authorities and you're the subservient, however you want to put it, but the fact of the matter is you are the student and you're the one who's going to you're now presented with a path and told by two experts, one saying, if you take this path, you will achieve your goal. And another one telling, if you take this path, you will fail. So, and you're the one in the middle listening to both the experts tell you these things. What are you supposed to do with that information?
And
right?
The reality is, like it or not, for many people who are unbelted fighters who have aspirations, great. Now I have two knights fighting. I'm going to piss off one of them. What am I going to do? Is this a career limiting move, whatever I choose? And we have to acknowledge that this is something that is in the minds of some unbelts if they have aspirations. I don't want to annoy the shiv and either not take the advice or take the advice, because the take the advice is do the thing or don't do this, and the other one is do the thing. Now they're caught in between. I'll just pretend it didn't happen. I'm just going to use my mind powers and erase this from everybody. So I have sympathy for the person, and when I see them again, I will ask, what path do they want, and we can. If they say I would like to proceed, I'd be like, cool beans. Let's work on doing this as safely as possible.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is we find those. I know for me, and you guys can speak up on this after. If I see somebody that's super rigid about something and somebody that's willing to think and talk about it, you know who I gravitate to? That person that has an open enough mind to think and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of nodding heads. And I think this comes down to exactly what Tristan was talking about, and that is everybody has something to give, and you should listen.
Well, and there's a huge life lesson here that I think everybody on the planet really needs to absorb, and that is, regardless of the advice that you're given or the instruction or the commands you're given, you are ultimately responsible to choose, and because you're the one that's going to live with the consequences of that decision. And to just kind of outsource your thinking to experts, you're going to run the risk of having to go along with, there's no consequence for them when you fail. The consequence is going to be yours. So you're going to have to just use your best judgment. And, in life, in my opinion, it's not so much what you do as how you do it. If you had two opposing mentors who were giving you advice, you can easily say, thanks, I really appreciate this. I'm going to mull this around and figure out, maybe I'll go try it and see if this thing works. And if it doesn't, I'll know that you were right. And if it does, I'll know you were right. But that's all at the end of the day we're doing as martial artists, is we're experimenting with what works for us. And we're getting fielding ideas for things that we can try. And there's stuff that Aighleanan does that I can never pull off in my wildest dreams. And I'm sure that it runs the opposite. It's not a thoroughly linear path. That's why martial arts are arts. They're not sciences. If they were a science, they'd be like chemistry or physics. That is what it is. You're either right or you're wrong, and that's all. It doesn't work that way. We're not all the same or built the same or operate the same mentally, physically. So there's going to be that latitude for you to define your art. It's more like music or cooking. There are principles, but at the end of the day, it's your personal expression that's going to make your fighting yours. If that makes sense.
So let me just throw in that one of the both good and bad things about the SCA is it's a little territorial. So you can actually use its territorialness and its proprietariness to help you through these situations. When you've picked a mentor, or if someone's training is resonating well with you, you can say, thank you very much for what you're sharing with me, different person. But currently right now, I'm under the tutelage of so-and-so. And, I want to kind of stick with what they're saying right now, but I'd like to think about what you're doing. And I might come back to you in a bit and work with you on it. But right now I'm focused on, sort of what Sir so-and-so or, Lord so-and-so or Lady so-and-so is sharing with me. And if they fight you on that, well, fuck them. They're not the trainer for you. So just, and as politely as possible, you can just sort of, hey, I'm just getting my training from someone else right now, and I'm going to focus on that for now. But you see it all the time. And I know Bess and all the other, female fighters in the SCA have to deal with this. They've always had people coming and trying to teach and train them. We've talked about this before, and I've seen it my whole SCA career. Anytime a lady has started fighting, there's 10 different guys all trying to tell them something different about what to do. And when they've come to me and say, what do I do in that situation? And I'm saying, if you're comfortable with it, tell them that you're getting trained by me. Yes. And that they can come to me if they've got something they want to kind of share that I can, kind of add to your curriculum. And, for everyone that's local for me, they know they can rely on that. And I hate that it's a situation. And, I hate that people get weird about their wanting to train folks who aren't receptive to what they want to teach them, you ought to be able to pick up on that. I need to get better at picking up on that. I'm sure there's times I should have noticed that someone gotten glossy eyed when I was talking to them, and maybe I need to go find someone else to train for a little bit,
But we're too busy training.
But we are a weirdly territorial squire base, and it doesn't have to be your specific squire, but I have knights that I'm working with who will tell other people when they come and work with them, I'm working on something right now with Aighleanan and with Morgan.
Yeah.
And we're trying to, work on something, and I appreciate what you're telling me, and I will think about it, but it's not anything I'm going to be working on with you today.
And I think that's a great, you kind of nailed that one. I think that's a great way to put it. Is like, if anyone, like you have somebody you're working with, they can, and this goes out to, those that need this help, where it's like, hey, thank you very much for the insight, but right now I'm working on this thing that this person's, helping me with. And I'd like, or, you don't even have to say you liked it, but if you did like, it's like, I do like what you're talking about. If you don't mind, I'd like to come back to you in the future and talk about this more, but right now I'm working on this thing.
Yeah.
So,
or even if you're not sure about it, just say, you know what? I need some time to think about that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that I get it, but I want to think about it.
Yeah.
And, again, you're just using your words and communicating. I'm all about that. Use your words. Don't make people guess what you're thinking. I do want to add, though, when we're talking about training, and Aighleanan, you've touched on it, and we mentioned it earlier, to have the various levels of students training other students. I know some people said to me, but Bess, I can't train. I'm not a knight and I'm not a royal peer.
Oh,
That's okay. It's not, and they said, but I'm just me type of thing. And the answer is that's okay. Everybody has something to train. Everybody has something to teach. In the SCA, as we know, in period, pride is a sin, but it's overwhelming pride. It's not prideful to say, hey, I know a thing. I can teach you the thing that I know. It's a statement of fact. So you're not being full of pride and expressing one of the 7 deadly sins. You're just going, hey, I know a thing. You're not like, man, I know a thing and I'm rocking it and I'm going to tell you. You're like, I know a thing. I'll share it with you. And that is 100% okay. It doesn't matter, if you've been authorized for 3 weeks and somebody comes along and they don't know it. Maybe it's a rule of the list. Do you know what rule number 6 of the rule of the list is? Why, yes, I do. Each fighter shall comport themselves in a knightly and chivalrous manner. That's actually true. You can look it up. But that's okay. It's okay. Everybody can train. So please, if you need it, Bess, I'm working with Bess, and she said it's okay for me to do some training.
So, and I guess this goes back and somebody, again, a great comment that, a very structured practice can be actually hurtful to how you learn, but a very unstructured practice can as well. And there's somewhere in between there. And I think this goes, the fighter's mind talks about this, ego. And that ego, if you think that, there is only one way, then your path is downward from there, because you're not open to learning. And, and there's always somebody to learn from. Now you're not going to be great at everything, guaranteed. And, there was another conversation about that same idea that, we can take a look at American Tai Chi and see a lot of examples of, there's combative Tai Chi out there, push hand and all of these others. And, these real practitioners where they're competing hate 90% of the American Tai Chi out there, because you have people as like, they're throwing their students around. We watch videos all the time. They're throwing their students around with no effort and are not even touching them. And their students are flying around. Their students literally believe that. Because they're so rigid, and they convinced them that this chi thing is a real thing, that, and then when somebody comes in they can't do stuff with them because their chi is so strong, they're going to hurt them, and, or, all this other kind of stuff. And, that's what you get into that rigid structure, because as you go downhill, because you're not willing to learn and really push yourself to see if it's real, you then stuck in that construct where it's like, okay, I do exactly what they do, and you never test yourself and you never know, and until it's too late. So it's truly a interesting place to be. And the good part about the SCA is we test ourselves all the time. And maybe too much, maybe, and that's where that unstructured piece comes from. That's where the first question comes from. Can I just go out there and try to beat everybody up until I'm better? Well, some people can do that, but we're not all geared the same in the head. Some people they need those foundational things to build on. Otherwise, they can't get there. And we see that in modern sports right now, where, and we talked about this before, where we see inner city kids come into, schools and be the top athletes in schools. And then now we're in a place where those inner cities kids are no longer, they're having a harder time competing, because we have kids that are going to year-round camps and year-round basketball and year-round baseball, and going to private practices at places where they're getting semi-pros coming in and showing them how to jump, how to run, how to do all of these things perfect. They're learning real skills, and they're learning how to do them better. And because they have the money, they can do that, and they're actually becoming more consistent than these other players. Not that those inner cities kids couldn't be as good, they just don't have the same resources, and it's becoming an issue actually in a lot of schools.
Yeah, and that teaching comes down to learning the fundamentals of their sport.
Yep.
And when you get a good coach, good instructor, the fundamentals will be transferred, and then you build on whatever talent that the students have. But if they lack talent, the fundamentals will make them a good player. Maybe not a great player. They'll only get to the point where their talent or interest will take them. But without fundamentals, now all you're doing is playing on instinct. And some kids can have some really good instinct, but instinct lacking fundamentals will hit a ceiling pretty fast.
Yep.
We've seen it. We'd let them. We had someone come to our practices for a while who had good instincts, loved Florentine, wouldn't listen to us. I mean, he was totally safe. He wouldn't listen to us. So we just started beating him repeatedly. And after, I think it was maybe a year or two, he came to us. He said, I'm tired of being beaten. I want to learn something. We were like, okay, now you're ready to learn. We are happy to teach you.
The door to the mind opened in that one moment after banging his head on the ceiling for a while.
And that's not necessarily wrong. That's just their journey.
Yeah,
it is.
Everyone gets to have a different journey if they want one. And one of the best things about the SCA is it's not just a sport, and it's not just a martial art. It's an adventure that we get to have, and adventures are different. And people also want different kinds of adventures. Some people don't want some of the adventures I've had probably aren't legal anymore. So, it's actually a really cool thing. And I think as we want to try to make the fighting aspects of our adventure an easier thing to learn, and make the path for people not quite as difficult as it was for us, where, we all probably self-taught ourselves so much. And while I don't regret our journey, and I don't regret my personal journey of having to teach myself how to fight so much, I envy people today to have the resources that we and others are trying to provide them. And I think it's a great time to be a new SCA fighter.
Yeah. And you have to allow that freedom, I guess, that's a big point. And I think that gets right back to that point of that intermediate point where sometimes people want to see outside of what you teach, and holding them back is actually only doing you a disservice. You will lose them more by holding them back by maybe helping them find those people that do something so well, even better than you, and helping them go there and get that education. And I think that flows right into kind of the advanced person. You know, everything from advanced from, you know, hey, I'm a great unbelt and I'm pushing the edge, to hey, I'm Aighleanan and Ragnvaldr and I'm kicking everyone's ass. Look at, they're both going to get all red and, you know, but for real, I mean, you guys don't have a lot of people to go to and learn from, but you're still driving yourself to learn, right?
I think this conversation is going to show that we don't think that.
I know.
We think we have lots of people that we can go and learn from, and that's what we want to share with in this part of the conversation with everyone, that regardless if you're the best squire at practice, regardless if you're the best left-handed fighter at practice, you know, whatever the best of anything that you think is, that's not the stopping point of this at all. I have literally lived with being the quote unquote best fighter at practice for most of my SCA life. I'm actually kind of fortunate that I'm not there at the moment. I think Morgan gets the best of me, you know, when we're going out there, and that's a cool thing. But the lessons that I had to teach myself on how to still be good and to keep learning and to stay sharp and to stay focused are lessons that you don't actually have to be the best fighter at fighter practice. They're just good lessons. They're lessons on how to continue your progression as a fighter. So the topic of what do you do when you're the best fighter at practice is a little disingenuous. At some point, you have to start finding different ways to challenge yourself. You have to start finding, you know, we talk about this all the time. You have to start creating different victory conditions for what, you know, what fighter practice means for you and what you intend to take away from it. You have to start finding different ways to maintain focus. So we hear this all the time, you know, so-and-so is starting to look a little rusty or starting to look a little slow. And you talk to them and they're like, yeah, I've been training a lot of new people and I've been, you know, and I've been going to the so-and-so shire instead of, you know, the big baronial practice and everything. And it's like, I just don't understand. I understand it, but I don't understand it because this is a mental thing. This is not about what practice you're going to. It's about what you're doing at that practice, you know, why you think you have to sacrifice yourself to train someone else. You don't, you know, so to give us some practicality to this. And if you followed, you know, me on these streams before, this is a very, very normal, typical thing for me to say. So you need to, especially when you're in the sparring aspect of things. And this is where that we've lost our focus or we've lost our sharpness things. It's in the sparring component. You need to, and I highly recommend to all fighters, you need to try to understand what understanding 100% of your defense means in your guard and what 100% of your fighting awareness, which includes what range you are from your opponent, what range your opponent is from you, what weapons and ranges are going on there, how quick they are, how quick are you, you know, these are components of fighting that you need to understand what is 100% and then never let it go down. You can put a big ass dial on your sword arm if you want to, and you can turn it down to 20% if that's going to make the sparring a better learning opportunity for your fighter. But if you at least understand what 100% of being what a good guard is and what good fighter awareness is, then you can fight nothing but lesser opponents and stay sharp. You'll go to the very next tournament that you're going to, and guess what? Your defense is 100%. Your fighting awareness is 100%. And frankly, there's way too much emphasis on where your sword arm is anyway. You know, that's not I know people think that's what wins the fight, but it's not what wins the fight. What wins the fight is knowing about the fight and not getting hit. And if you can know about the fight and not get hit, then eventually you'll figure out how to actually get the win. So, you know, you just have to, I don't think it's a radical change in how you think about fighting for you guys, but it is for a lot of people. I still get people go, whoa. And it's like, no, just learn what being intense and focused is about the right things. It's not about how you hit someone.
Yeah. Ragnvaldr, you have to deal with this a lot, right?
Yeah. Well, like we talked about before, I'll change victory conditions. But I'll also get a lot of benefit out of it. Because I tend to be able to win more than most of our guys at practice, that doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of value for me. His now highness has helped me a lot. I still best him most of the time, and for quite a while, he's obviously gotten consistently better and better. But there was a period where I beat him a lot. But even so, over the last year or so, his analytical ability is very high. And so when we fight, or even if I'm fighting somebody else and I happen to know that he's watching, I will ask him for input. What did you see going on in there? The fact that I can get more wins against him, Lisa, thank you. The fact that I can get more wins from him does not preclude the fact that he's an outstanding fighter with excellent analytical abilities. For me to ignore that simply because I don't get all victories, I just get more victories. That's the problem. And I think that's what Aighleanan was pointing out earlier, was when we say, well, I'm the best fighter at practice. This isn't a line. This isn't everybody goes up the same path and anybody who's better is farther up the path. That's not it at all. It's not a path, although we call it a path a lot. I'm a picture person, so I've got like 100 analogies for this kind of thing. But the one that comes to mind is if you think about it, instead of it like a path, every little bit of skill that you brought from your past, plus all the skills, techniques, and things you've learned while fighting from whomever you learned them, the same person and different people, preferably different, you get more. Think of each one of those as a brick. And you use that brick to build this wall of skill. And in my mind, I have seen people stack their bricks very high and out so they can hit that victory point. But their wall is unstable. And somebody with skill sees the holes in their wall and can disrupt their wall. Okay, this isn't just because he's higher. That guy may have a higher wall than others, but a solid fighter will have a more solid wall. He will not fall apart like this guy up here, who doesn't really know when he's going to win or when his wall is going to suddenly collapse on him. It's the same analogy I use for, like you mentioned, learning from failures. For me, I dislike the word failure. What works for me is I'm not looking for failures. What I'm doing is I'm looking for places where I didn't put bricks. Where are my missing bricks? So when somebody beats me, when I can go to His Highness Louis and say, we fought and you got these shots several times on me. What were you seeing? He helps me find the brick that's missing. And then I can go, I have a missing brick. I put a brick in there because of Louis' help. And now my wall is stronger. So it's taken me decades to build a wall, and it's not a solid wall, but it's pretty good, So I guess that's the way that I see it. There's just too many pieces of knowledge out there you can use to build your house of skill, or whatever you want to call it. If you think you're working on a path and you think because your victories have made you better than everybody else, I'll bet you there's some point along your wall where somebody else's wall is better than your wall. And if you don't learn how to build bricks like they did, then you are not better.
Yeah. Tristan, you're the best guy at practice, right?
We had, and it's interesting because when Aighleanan was talking about, the idea of having several practices to choose from, and there might be like a heavier practice, a lot of really experienced people, you could go there, or you could go to like a little shire practice. The longest time we had a practice that was out in the sticks. Like we didn't have any knights. We had a few squires, and they were looked up to like knights. Like this, of course, this was a long time ago. So what I noticed, and I became local knight marshal for quite some time, and kind of had the responsibility of wrangling, okay, what do we do with a practice that's got a fair number of new people? We do have some experienced people, but they don't show up frequently. Do you bring structure into it? And this was before I did any martial art instruction or anything like that. And, kind of like with all the SCA, you just do the best you can with what you got. And I remember trying to obviously help people that came in new, say, okay, you're going to get started. Let's try to guide you through. And I remember there was a guy that came through and all he really wanted to do was put on armor and spar. That was it. He didn't want to learn. He didn't want to be coached. He was rather stubborn and would not really take any advice, but he followed the path that I think that somebody mentioned in one of the earlier comments of, I'm just going to go fight and fight and fight and fight and fight. And I'm going to drive and fight and drive and fight and drive and fight. And eventually he got very, very good, but it took him about 12 years to do it. In my humble opinion, I think somebody who approaches it like that is making the road a lot longer for himself, because he was not willing to accept advice for how can you do this quicker, or how can you get to your destination with guidance of somebody who's done it more. But the structure at our practice at the time, and it really hasn't changed a whole lot, although we've gotten, a bunch of knights there that tend to go there now, or at least for a while, there was regularly knights there and people who were good experience levels of, but and for a while I was one of basically the top person there. And I realized very quickly, it's like, if I do it the way this other guy did it, and I just showed up and put on my armor and said, all right, come and beat me, pretty much the only thing that would happen is practice the numbers would dwindle, because people don't want to show up and just get beat up and then go home without the exchange of, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? Can you help me? I want to learn something. And the SC is more than just a martial art. It is the connection. And somebody pointed out in the comment a little bit earlier of and it brought to my mind the relationship you build with somebody when you're a new person. You show up to a group, you're not really sure what the group's about, you're interested, and you get some personal investment in you. Somebody says, thank you for showing up. What is it you want that I can help you get? And I'll do that. That's how you build a group. And for those people that will, I know the question is, okay, you're the best at your practice. If you make the people better underneath you, yes, they will get better and challenge you. And that's what will make you better, is fighting better opponents. And you can get in the car and drive to the next practice, and that might be 4 hours away. It might be an hour away, whatever. But when we're talking about your own practice, the one that's going to be in your backyard, that's how you're going to build it. Not by having your ego say, well, and I love this question from earlier on, what do you do as an experienced fighter? Do you choose not to fight somebody because they won't test you? They won't challenge you? Are they a waste of your time? My answer to that would be no, they're not a waste of your time. Invest in them. Invest in that person, because they right now might not challenge you, but if you work with them for a couple of months, they're going to start to challenge you, maybe just a little bit. And that's a start. You invest in them. They like to come back to practice. And it won't take that long before you'll start seeing that glimmer of hope of them building their skills and their abilities to the point where you're going to have to get a little better in order to do that. But it takes setting your ego aside and say, for the moment, I'm going to invest in you, the student. And then the time pays off when it's like, okay, this really is in the long run investing in myself, because I'm going to have a solid practice group here, a lot of skilled people. And in the long run, you're gonna rise the tide that raises all the boats.
Yeah, I think, and I think that gym piece and kind of rolling back, because I know that we're getting around a lot of subjects here, is, we look at some of the people we've kind of been talking about around here, and just kind of recognizing that it's interesting how a lot of the people winning crowns lately have been people that were engaged in online activities. You're all here still learning something. You're not learning physical technique, but you're learning ways to help yourself get better. You're thinking about what you do. You're thinking about, you're challenging yourself to become better. And so you're here doing those things, right? And that's that hotbed of talent, right? And I was just going to bring up, you look at, you see this in boxing all the time. You have Merriweather's gym, in Vegas, and you have these, everything from Wild Card to Shamrock's gym. You got these hotbeds of talent, and they're not just doing it by themselves. What they're doing is they're pushing each other to constantly get better. And the next thing you know, you're the hotbed of talent, right? And that might mean, hey, let's go out to this practice over here and we'll pick up something and bring it back home. Let's fly, Ragnvaldr or Aighleanan in, and we'll see what we can learn from them, and then build on that. And let's get a couple of people that want to fly out to some big practice wherever it is, and that's how you push yourself when you're at that level. You have to build, and here's the biggest piece: you have to have a big enough. You have to have a flexible enough ego to allow yourself to lose, to challenge yourself. And when I say that, it's like, well, doesn't everybody do that? I will tell you that that's absolutely not the truth. I have seen lots of crowns. They spend a ton of time while they're on the throne, not able to fight, not able to challenge themselves the way they normally do because they're so busy. And then when they step off, they look and go, well, I'm a royal peer now. And you look at that guy that you used to fight that's a challenge, and you're like, well, I think I'm going to go warm up over here first. And the next thing you know, you never fight that guy again because you don't want to lose. And then you start losing a little bit to the guy you just stepped down to. So you fight the next guy down because you don't want to lose, because your ego can't take it. And then you get to that place where you're like, wow, I just don't have it anymore. And you can't figure out why. And that's the breaking point. That's I have some injuries. Maybe I'm just done. Or, I need to go back and learn and get better again. You have to, that's a hard breaking point. So my suggestion is keep reading the books, keep listening to us, keep watching video, keep looking at people's different drills and techniques, keep looking for opportunities to get better. Drag your coach or teacher with you. Point stuff out to them. If they, it's like, hey, I found this cool thing. See what they come back. If they get engaged, and you have a person hand in hand on the same path as you. Right? And that's what you're looking for. That's how you build that hotbed.
One of the things that I would recommend to people where, we're talking about so what is it? What if you're the best fighter at practice? And I would recommend you stop that. Stop being the best fighter at practice. As Sean likes to say, you're not the king of practice. So if you're winning everything, stop doing that. Start trying something new. Start doing something that maybe is kind of goofy, but it might work. Try doing something new, something you've seen on a video or something you've seen elsewhere. And you know what's going to happen? You're not going to be the best fighter at practice anymore because you're trying something new. You're working on new things. And frankly, when you work on new things, I'm going to try to move in this way. And then your body isn't used to it. So things tend to fall apart a little bit. God knows I've been working with Brannos and Ragnvaldr for the last couple of years on footwork and other things. And I would like to acknowledge the fact that my fighting feels like it's taken a step backwards because I've gotten off one path that I've been on. It's been quite comfortable all along. I'm quite good at this path, but I truly felt like I had come to the end of the path. And frankly, I was thinking about quitting fighting because I couldn't find a way to get better. So COVID was really good for me because I got to take classes with Brannos and Ragnvaldr, and I learned some more stuff. So I'm off this path where I'd reached the end. I'm on a new one. And I'm glad that I'm not the king of practice. I don't want to be the king of practice because that means I'm not trying new things. And I think that I would encourage anybody who is, the best fighter at practice to lose a few because you're trying something new. And that's okay. You don't have to think, oh, well, Christ, my body count's down. I've lost it. No, you're trying new things. And that's super important. So I encourage you to do that.
I think you could look at it too of saying if you go to practice merely to spar, you have no structure. There is no structure to your training. You're just playing. And any athlete, any competitor will tell you without structure in your training, you're going to hit the ceiling pretty fast. And all you're relying on is your talent and your instincts. So when they talk about, and I think these are great, change your victory conditions, set particular goals, have things in your mind that you want to work on and stick to those things. That is providing your own self structure when there's no external structure within a practice. And I found that to be very, very helpful. In fact, it was helpful not only for what I was doing at practice, I found that it was helpful for motivating myself. You know, we had our practices, I think, on Tuesday nights and then Sundays. And what I would do for the 2 or 3 days leading up to practice, I'd think about, okay, what were the things last week that stuck in my mind that I need to work on, that deficiencies that I found. And so I'd think, okay, well, how am I going to tackle them? What am I going to do to solve the problem? What am I going to experiment with and try? And so my brain would churn on that. And then I'd be eager. By the time I got to practice, I'm like tearing that armor bag open, like, all right, I got my plan. I got my little bullet list of what I'm going to go over. I wasn't just showing up to like, hopefully somebody will be here that's pretty good and we can have a good fight. It was, nope, I want to work on this and that and the other. And of course, then I'd go through my practice and it was almost all sparring. We didn't do any classes or anything like that. But I could stick to my game plan and say, all right, I want to flush these things out. And I would improve some. I would, within that hour or two or a couple hours that we were doing it, make some headway on my bullet list. And then I'd find some deficiencies to add to the list. And so my day after, my debriefing would be, okay, what were the deficiencies that came up? What had happened that was not going right? And then be like, okay, well, that's me on my mental list for what the next practice is. What's the next thing? What are my next 3 bullet list things? Because I like keeping it simple. You don't go in with a legal pad full of list things to do. Just pick 1, 2, or 3, and just say, I want to spend some time on these. Yep. And I'd always save. That also allows you to work on those things and save some time to help other people. And I felt that was always a crucial part of the social aspect of fighting, which is you're not there just for yourself. You are there to spend at least a portion of your time helping your partner or your opponent or the other people that are new. So you're not just, blinders on focusing on yourself.
Yeah. And I think the 3 things is really good because you're not overwhelming yourself with so many things, but it also gives you a gate to check yourself against, Mm-hmm. If you have 3 things you're working on, you can say, did I do that better today?
Right.
I think, this kind of, we kind of burnt out the advanced fighter bit a little bit, but, this is where everybody's trying to get to. And there's a lot of people there that are at the top. Let every one of those people, it's hard up there. I know that I thought I worked a lot when I was younger about finding the fights and getting the big fights and all of that. But, when you go to a practice and Bess can account for this, that sometimes you're doing footwork for 2 hours, and then, all different types of footwork, and we're falling in and we're adding layers of footwork onto that, and we're adding flow into that, and we're developing these things. And, I had a lot of people come to those classes and be like, I couldn't walk up the stairs the next day, mm-hmm. And so that showed us 2 things. One is, hey, okay, I was working footwork really well, but boy, am I weak in the legs. So there's another place to go and look. And that comes down to that, finding expertise where you need to. I mean, sometimes that expertise is not in the SCA. Tell you the truth. I mean, you could probably right now, almost all my new stuff comes out of boxing or out of some kickboxing or stuff like that. And there's tons of range work in there. There's tension work that nobody even talked about in the past. There's, it's that mental game starts getting played in there. Going into, understanding what the long game is so that, you can kind of pull breath out of people and find that weakness before you dedicate to yourself to something, and then we look at different layers of boxing. Not only it's footwork and it's range work, it's mental work. It's, then you look at everything from, it's Eastern European, Mexican boxing, different Cuban boxing, all of those, and what the differences are, and see how. And the more you understand those, the more you can equate them into the game. But sometimes you have to look outside to see it. You know, endurance does help you as long as you understand how your tension, how you're controlling your tension. You know, learning to, you know, people talk about chess all the time. We're like, well, why would I play chess? It's because chess, you know, look at Josh Wakens. This guy took his chess understanding of how to manipulate people inside of chess and the game and the mental aspect of chess and how to break people inside that game right into Thai boxing, then right into Tai Chi, push hand, and won world championship at that. And then he moved it right into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And, you know, that same mental game existed all the way through there. So he learned that in chess and he applied, but that discipline, he carried that discipline along with him as well. So, you know, be aware. I mean, I know early in COVID, I tell you, we had a number of people on that were really good at understanding how to stretch, how to work out based on what we do. And those things were really great because those are things I'm like, oh, hey, if I do that's going to help my strength in the things I do. I didn't know, you know, these people take classes or they've been doing it or they're trainers, you know, all of those things. There's people out there that do those things. There's people in the SCA that are better at doing those things than maybe fighting. And there's still someone to learn from. So that's why you have to be open-minded and willing to listen to what other people do. Like right now, you know, like Aighleanan talks about basketball, and I started pulling up basketball stuff. I'm like, God damn it, I hate basketball. Why am I watching all this basketball video?
Because certain core parts of competition are consistent through all the disciplines. I got one more thing I want to add up, you know, to the quote unquote advanced fighter, and it's not an advanced technique. It's barely an intermediate thing. And in my personal journey, I got pretty good at fighting by just sparring because I loved it. It was so much fun. I got pretty darn good at it. I believe that I got better than good. You know, I don't want to say that I'm great, but I think I got better than good by divorcing the beating an opponent or the winning a tournament from, you know, taking that a little bit. I can't, my ego won't let me take it completely aside, but I have, you know, to get better at the sport part, pushed it over and allowed a lot of room for what I believe is the better mantra, which is, and it's the thing that I noticed, you know, I noticed watching Brannos and Ragnvaldr do this years ago. If you take away whether or not they won the fight, what did they do? What makes them consistently really fucking good? And it is they consistently fight well. You know, the winning happens as a result of having a great defense and an offense that's ready to go and an understanding of what's happening in that fight. The winning is a byproduct of all of those other things. And it's not just, I swing a sword great. You know, that actually will take you a long ways, but it won't take you over the hump into consistent excellence. Consistent excellence comes from understanding what fighting well means and fighting well, you know, and applying all that. And this whole notion of, I lose my focus or I lose my sharpness when I'm working with other people or when I'm fighting down or when I'm not actually getting a chance to spar against people who are as good or better than me. You've lost something in there somewhere. Because if you were still trying to fight well, consistently, you know, mentally all the time, if you're trying, you'll be sharp and ready for the actual challenge the next time you get a challenge. You know, and I love to win. That's a competitive part of me. It's problematic, but it's also helped me. But I actually got consistently good by trying to be good and not do dumb stuff and not make mistakes and understanding what the heck was happening in the fight. You know,
I think
not getting hit.
something that would help, because I can see that newer people or maybe even intermediates would kind of say, well, fighting well, that's a very broad and vague term. Think of it this way: that consistently good fighter is one that adheres to the principles of combat. When you don't make mistakes, you will fight a lot better. What is a mistake? Is when you violate a principle of fighting. And that those principles can be footwork related, they can be balance related, they can be related to your mental side. Unfortunately, there's no book of fighting principles that you can just go buy on Amazon and have them listed off 1 to 1,000. But as you find out and learn from different people, whether they articulate it this way or not, usually when they found something that works consistently well, they have found a principle of fighting and they stick to it. And they don't let themselves or their ego or their passion draw them off away from that to get creative and quote unquote make a mistake. And we've seen this in tournaments where somebody will go out, they'll be fighting their consistent game, they get frustrated, and then they'll go do something stupid thinking, well, I can try this crazy stunt and maybe it'll work. And that's when they get beat, is they make a mistake. They go outside of the principles of combat.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's room for creativity in this. I don't want people to think that there's not room for creativity.
Right.
But it's the creativity when it's outside of what you can do that will get you in trouble.
Right.
Exactly.
You
try something that you have no basis of a defense from. You throw a shot that opens yourself up, and then that good, consistent fighter who just happens to be in a good guard and hanging out there takes advantage of you.
Yeah.
You can be creative. Just do it within the tools of good fighting.
Yeah. And I think that's where the SCA started, is like there's lots of inconsistency. We're all just learning together and we're throwing all kinds of crap. And now we have people that really found a system and they're digging deeper and deeper into that system. They believe in that system and they're willing to still change that system to make their things work, and that's that depth inside. They're not so rigid to the system where they're like, nope, that punch didn't work, so I'm just going to keep throwing it and that guy's going to keep blocking it. They're like, maybe if I throw it a little slower, maybe if I slide out and throw it a little bit differently, they think of ways inside of their system to make it work against the opponent that they have. And this is why the top fighters in the world usually, pin, choke out, knock out people with the same 3 things over and over and over again. It's like Ragnvaldr hitting people. I'm like, he comes back after a heroics. I'm like, ooh, I wish you could find a different shot one day.
When all you need is one.
I just want to jump in. One little last thing. Brannos, you mentioned earlier that Aighleanan was telling you about basketball, even though you hate it. And Ragnvaldr, earlier you referenced Brannos telling you something about your fighting that helped you. And I was at a practice on Thursday night, and one of the fighters, we were doing some work, and he noticed something about his opponent that I hadn't noticed. And it was a really good observation. I was super impressed. So what I'm hearing and what I truly believe in is you need a fighting buddy. I have a fighting buddy. It's somebody who, you just let down your ego and you go, somebody you trust, and you go, I need help. And somebody at your practice who, you can talk to, and what did you see and what did you happen? And then when you have a fighting buddy, somebody who knows you, as Brannos, Ragnvaldr, you can say, I've seen you do this, and this is what you haven't been doing, or this is what you have been doing. So as hard as it might be to sort of, turn to one of your friends who God knows, I've got friends that like to rib me, say, so here's the thing. You saw me tonight. I was working on this. Tell me about it. Somebody you respect, somebody you trust. I encourage everybody to get a fighting buddy.
Yeah, I like it. Ragnvaldr is my fighting buddy.
Yes, absolutely. She had mentioned that to me earlier, and that's absolutely true. Brannos and I have gone through a lot together and have very similar paths. and see each other frequently. And there are things that I can talk with him that I can't with others. There are he has an insight into how I think intimately because we're around each other so often at practices, and he can often not necessarily always just help me find where I need help, but have a solution for me. I have one recently that I've gone through, and because he is my fighting buddy and has been for such a long time, he was able to. I didn't have to go to him and say I'm having these problems. He knew I was having problems, and we talked about them. And then he said, "Try this, do this thing." He's done it before with me. Come up with something that was right on the note. My favorite was a few years ago when I had to rebuild how I was fighting, and I kept having these problems. And he gave me a painfully simple piece of advice. Nobody else had given it to anybody else, and I don't think anybody else would have. But he was someone who could say, "Are you doing this? What about this?" And I felt myself get angry because I knew he was right. He was totally right. But we have that not just because of a skill, but because of fight. I don't know, maybe fighting buddies is the best word for it. We have this similarity, this intimacy in our path. That's a rare gift to have. But like Bess pointed out in her examples, even though I really only have that much of a closeness with Brannos, I have it in little pieces or to degrees with others, some more than others. And we can use that. We can turn to those people when those paths do cross or parallel and say, "I was doing a thing. What did you see? I'm having difficulties. What are you seeing?" Or be able to go to others and say, when I see you doing this thing, when I had that problem, this is how I solved it. So we can be there for one another, and we can look for those pieces in others. That's how I think when we become the best fighter at practice, that's the way we're going to learn. But like the guys pointed out earlier, that's not just for best fighters. That's for all fighters. There are these gifts that everybody has, and when our paths parallel, take those gifts, ask for them, and then give them out when you have the chance to do it. And if you're lucky enough to have somebody you can walk so long side by side with, take that. It's a gift.
So we're kind of running at the end right now. One thing, it's funny, we talk about, what happens when you pass your trainer. And I think at the end, maybe we never pass our trainer, even though we fight better than them.
Yep.
They may still be your buddy. They may still drive you to be the best fighter you can be. And I think that's important for people to recognize, because sometimes they look at that person training them as that's their competition. They're not your competition. They're literally, they are giving you, and hopefully you're giving them that friendship that will bring the love to what you do alive. And because I'm going to tell you, and Aighleanan went to this, and I read it in every book, you have to love what you do. And there's going to be times when you don't, but you have to find the thing you do love and remember it again. Because if you don't love this, it is very hard to become the greatest at what you do. So, anything else, folks? We're a little past 9:30. Any quick tips?
Well, I just gave mine. So
all right, Bess, you good?
Go ahead.
We're fighting, buddy.
Tristan.
Yeah. If there's no structure, put your own structure in. And just like any other skill, it may take a while of practice for you to do it effectively. Just because you do it the first time and you're kind of clumsy with it, don't give up. But if you got to do it yourself, do it yourself.
yes.
Aighleanan.
I just want to kind of reiterate what I've heard from others tonight that I think is it's perfect. And that is, whether you think of this as a journey or you're building a house, it's still something that's done in a community. This is this. If you have to, occasionally you might have to do a, choose your own adventure solo thing, but this is so much better when you're in a group or when you're in a party or whatever. And it's because we get to lean on each other along the way. We get to be strong for each other along the way. We get to learn from each other along the way, and we get to teach each other along the way. So the trials and tribulations on this whole thing, when shared, are doubly, triply, quadruply meaningful. So find people that you're comfortable being on this journey with, embrace them, and have a great time with it, because it is fun. It's amazing. And, bless you all for coming along this ride with us. And if you ever just want to hang out at an event and talk about how much you love fighting, and then, let's go play and do it, I'll be your Huckleberry.
All right. Well, the fun part next week, and Tristan, you're more than happy. I'd be more than happy to have you join us because you love the book reviews. Next week's book review is Chains of Faith by Sir Vitus. It's a very short book. I'm going to post it, in fact, on Coach's Corner so people can read it. But it kind of gives you that feel sometimes of, the Book of Five Rings. It's, and every time you read it, you can get a little bit from it. So we're going to do a review, and we're going to have Jamie Van Anseniger, Sir Jamie, who was one of Vitus's squires. And we have Viscount Kith, who is also one of his squires, and his Royal Highness Louis from the Mid-Realm, and myself. And if I can talk Tristan into it, I'm going to talk him into it. So,
oh man, I got to read. You're killing me.
Homework.
Oh.
So I hope it should be a fun one. Vitus was a character, and at least one of his squires that is on this is a character as well. So I'm looking forward to having a little bit of fun and some laughs, and looking forward to having everybody there. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Stay safe, get some practice in, and learn to love it. Find your buddy. Night, everyone.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Here.